The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Are you ready to take a journey? Let's connect with the healers of the world. It's that time. It's time for the Language of Healing on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Now here's your host, Emotional Wisdom Training Specialist Nicole Fortin.
Hello, everybody, and happy Friday to you. I hope you had a good week. Here in Calgary, we're getting into the spring season, and the weather is, well, we had snow this week, so it's trying to become spring and nicer weather, but the days are getting long, and it's feeling really good. And I quite enjoy the springtime for its regrowth and renewal energy that it brings, like we're coming out of winter and into the sunlight, the spotlight. And I think this is a very timely conversation we're having today with the amazing Don Hajicek. We'll bring him on in a moment here, but can you relate to wanting to be seen and being bigger and showing up in a more authentic way? I don't mean that in such a cliche, being authentic, but it's really showing up fully in all aspects of you. So your strengths and your weaknesses and the lightness of you and the shadow bits of you are all front and center when you really step into something bigger. And this is often what holds us back from really being seen and showing up, is those vulnerable parts of us that we don't want to be seen or don't want to be judged for. We don't want to sound like we don't know what we're doing, or, you know, the imposter syndrome is quite a big thing these days as well, something I've heard of. And, you know, connecting with that, the inner fraud, you know, who am I to do this, or what am I doing here? So these are all little shadow bits and archetypes that we can work with when we're confronted with wanting something and not knowing how to really move forward with that or step into that or really show up. And so one way that this does get confronted is with photography. And our guest today is a photographer and knows all about that, how people are showing up in front of camera, getting kind of shy, but at the same time, hi Heather, the imposter shows up for me. Yes, often for me. Yes. I think it's a very common one, right? That, you know, stepping into our own expertise and owning that and claiming that. And I don't know, maybe Don can help us out with that a little bit. So let's welcome our guest.
Mm-hmm.
Don, hey, how are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you, Nicole?
Oh, I'm good, thank you.
Yeah.
Good to see you. You look amazing.
It's
so
really
we're on, just so the listeners and people tuning in are aware, we are live on radio and live streaming on Facebook and YouTube. And if you're live with us, you can leave us comments and engage with us, just like Heather did. So, hi, welcome, Don. You look great.
You too. It's great to be here. Mm-hmm.
So this idea of, well, I know we're talking about showing up in the face of the wounded healer, and when you're, you know, doing photography, there's that healing aspect to that. And I love, happy Friday. Hi, thanks, Rachel. Good to see you on here. So can you tell us a little bit about, you know, what you're noticing with the work you're doing?
I am the photographer that people hire when they absolutely do not want to be photographed, which I know sounds kind of crazy, but through all the retreats and conferences I've been speaking at over the course of the last 8 years, not so much in 2020. Of course, this is another thing we're all emerging into this spring. But I've had thousands of women that I've spoken to and many, many hundreds of conversations. And there's this not enoughness piece that comes up quite a bit, because in photography especially, there's this moment that's frozen in time. And the fear is that when that moment is frozen in time, that they will be judged as not having been enough somehow. And when you think about, where that message comes from, I mean, women especially, men too, but women especially are bombarded constantly with this message of not being, tall enough, young enough, skinny enough, whatever. The thing is, it's just somehow something is missing. So the people that come to me, even if they're seem very confident in many other aspects of their life, and honestly, sometimes even if they've been photographed before and we're okay with it, they know there's somewhere deeper to go to make better connections, or they're finding out that there's somewhere deeper to go to make more meaningful connections to potential clients, potential mates. And so that starts to bring up the stuff when they're like, if I'm really seeing, am I ready for that? Right? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can really relate to that. And I mean, I personally have worked with you as well. Actually, Dawn is the magic behind the photo of our album cover here on the language of healing. And I mean, that's a fun story. We did that photo shoot in Melbourne, Australia, and a fellow nomad here. We've met in many parts of the world. But it's a very awkward state, like awkward place to be. I can definitely relate to that. That you have to have these photos, maybe for marketing, or you want to promote yourself. You're self-employed or an entrepreneur promoting your business, or you want some portfolio shots. You need to do that, right? So you need to step in for that next movement forward. So it's like this desire of wanting more, but not wanting to, I don't know, it's very highlighted in the hot seat when we're with you there.
Yeah, well, and it's, I'm suffering from it as the radio show starts. So this is something that we all deal with at some level. And, you've seen me give my speech. I do speeches, or have done speeches all over the world. And it's still, even after the first time, which, public speaking was my number one fear, me confronting being seen myself so that I can help other people be seen. There's this voice that I kept hearing every time I walked to step on the stage. I would hear this voice say, "Who the heck do you think you are?" Right? And I know that we all hear that voice sometime. And it's confronting that voice and realizing, sometimes finding out that you've got this, like you've got the information. My clients are all brilliant, like brilliant women, but it's this fear of nobody seeing it. Like they see them, but they don't see, or hear this brilliance.
Capturing that moment, that essence.
Yeah, because I think what comes across is when people see a photo and they might not think that person might know what they're talking about, it's usually the lack of confidence that's showing up. And that's why having someone that you trust to work with for your photographs is so important, because you're going to make a connection. So it's making sure that it's the right connection, getting that message that you want to have come across.
Mm-hmm. And what are some ways then that, because if you're new to somebody, a new client, and how do you build that rapport and that comfort to overcome? Obviously, they have a willingness to be there, right? Like, but if someone's maybe on the fence about doing something like that, like what can you do them?
I can tell you. Can I tell you a quick story?
Of course.
So, I work with a full range of people. There's someone who hired me months ago, and we have this planning time between the time they hired me and the time they're doing these photos to fill their website or for their dating profile, or oftentimes just for themselves. Like, that's a real thing too, is people that hire me and they have no intention of doing anything else with the photos other than having them. Like it's just the process, really. But anyway, and the other end of the spectrum is someone who goes to a retreat. I step on the stage the first day. They didn't even know I was going to be there. They hear me speak and they hire me. And maybe a couple hours later, I photograph them. So we don't know each other at all, other than what they've heard from the stage. Well, I had done this retreat in Washington, D.C. 4 or 5 years ago. And I actually spoke throughout this particular retreat. But the people who paid to be at the retreat also, it was someone else's retreat. But by virtue of being a part of this retreat, they were given the opportunity to work with me, right? So everyone that was at the retreat was automatically able to work with me. And I had a studio set up somewhere else. It was actually outside. So I was waiting in the studio for different people to pop in when their time came. Well, the woman came in to work with me and she said, I feel sorry that I wasted your time, but I actually have no intention of doing the photo session. I should have told you before so you could do something else for this hour. But, if you want to have coffee or just talk, we could just sit here. And I just, gently said, like, oh, do you want to talk about why it is that you don't want to have your photographs taken? And she listed 3 things that she hated about herself, 3 unchangeable things about who she is, right? And it was harsh, and I was actually taken aback. I hear people tell me the things they hate about themselves all the time, but this was so deep that I really felt her pain when she described it to me. And then she said, and when you were on stage yesterday, you said, this works for every woman. And when you said that, the first thing I thought was, what if it doesn't work for me? What if it doesn't work for me? What does that mean about me if it doesn't work for me? And I really hadn't considered that someone taking it that way. But I just responded to her and I said, give me 5 minutes with you and I'll show you the most beautiful photograph you have ever seen of yourself in your life. And she was like, what? And I said, give me 5 minutes. If you're up for it, give me 5 minutes at the end of it. If you don't want to keep going, we won't keep going. So she said, all right. So we went outside and I took her picture for 5 minutes. I showed her a photograph. She started crying with joy. And she kept going. So by the end of the hour, she said, well, I get 5 photos with this package, right? But what if I want more than 5? And I said, ooh, that's so beautiful. Like, let's remember where we were at the beginning of this session and how much you didn't want to do it. And do you see any of the things that you said you hated about yourself in these photos? And she didn't see it. And so the reason she didn't see it, and I can give your viewers some tips here too, for no matter what photographer they're working with, is that I took control of the mirror. So many people, we wake up in the morning and we shuffle over to the mirror possibly and look in the mirror and we think, oh man, there I am. The same me I saw yesterday, a day older actually. And here's this mental list of the things I would change about the person looking back at me if I could. And we're really making judgments about that person, in spite of however enlightened we may be, going through our lives and feeling love and compassion and non-judgment towards everyone else that we deal with throughout the day, hopefully, or trying to. But what happens when we stand in front of that mirror and see that face looking back at us? And I don't know if, Nicole, if you've ever had someone standing in front of you being very judgmental and saying terrible things about you, but at the time that person may be saying something like that, I think it's happened to most of us, you're not looking at that person and thinking, what an attractive, lovely person this is, filled with light, right? You're thinking, oh, I don't really enjoy the person who's looking at me right now. So if we're looking in the mirror at someone who's being very judgmental towards us, it's sort of a snowballing effect. This is, in my opinion, right? A snowballing effect, because we see the judgment and we're judging ourselves, and the more we see it, I think the worse it gets. So what I'm trying to do, and what I did in that first 5 minutes, was wrest control of the mirror from her. I'm never adding something to who a person is. I'm always subtracting whatever armor there is that's between them and me, them and the camera. First, I have to move it between them and me, and then it can come down between them and the camera, right? Mm-hmm. So
what kind of state, because that's a very I can really relate to that, coming when you're doing your work and you're coming to this place of like not control, there's another word that I'm thinking of, but that entrainment, like like laying the foundation for that, the environment, the space, holding the space even rather. So
right.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing was not what I did after she agreed to do the photos. The first thing was that I did not hesitate, and I said, give me 5 minutes and I'll show you the most beautiful photograph you've ever seen of yourself. Like, that took some of the armor away right away, because I wasn't like, yeah, maybe this is a bad idea. Right?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, because like when we're trying to be polite or something, like you're hearing someone and they're obviously sharing that is a vulnerability, right? Like, this won't work for me. And yeah, I think it's a real gift to be able to work with someone like you that can still be there and not agree with them, but just like hold them, like coach them, almost in like this vehicle.
It's kind of a walking into the scary places with people, because I've heard, that's one story. I, as you can imagine, I hear some story every single time, and it can range from, the list of things to, I had a woman in the studio with me at a hotel conference. We're in a hotel conference room. And she said, this is the first time I've been alone in a room with a man since I was sexually assaulted 5 years ago. And I feel like my very sexuality, that part of my feminine nature was taken from me at that time. And I want to know if it still exists, like just to feel like I touched that space in myself again, just to see, right? Just to embody it, right? Just the embodiment part. And if I'm not willing to just say, all right, well, let's go and see if we can find that. Like, with the client I just told you, the story I just told you, and the one before, if in that moment I'm like, okay, well, we don't have to do this, even if I said that in kindness, right, when they don't want to, and I'm like, okay, well, we don't have to do this. What would be different about their lives after they didn't do this thing, right? Does that make sense? And
yeah, like that's still the evidence that they're gathering, that like, oh, I was right, I couldn't do this, or
exactly.
Yeah, you give them the opportunity to really like break through that barrier. So you're talking about the wounded healer more these days, and that archetype, and how it really shows up, whether you're a traditional healer or not. I believe healing, and this is, the name of the show here is the language of healing. Healing is in so many aspects of our lives, in so many professions. Healing is that ability to make something whole, right? And yourself included. So,
right.
And then when we're faced with a camera in our space, it's like, ooh, all my wounds are here. I'm so vulnerable. It's going to catch all my ugly. But actually, the opportunity is that it really catches all the beauty, the beauty of everything. And I've heard you speak before about photography through the lens of love, and holding someone in that space.
Right. Well, and when I'm photographing someone, I think I'm looking for something different than what most photographers are, which I think is the difference that you see in my work. Because I'm not shooting it for me. Like, I don't care what's in my portfolio other than a bunch of real people, right? So I'm not looking for a moment of artifice, like artificial facade. I could use whatever in the studio and whatever after the photos, as far as Photoshop and things go, to create like the perfect thing that says nothing about who this person is, right? I'm looking for the moments when the armor comes down and I see, oh, there's her actual power, right? It's not the version that I'm going to put on her, that I'm going to tell her, well, this is what powerful looks like. Like, who am I to tell anybody what powerful looks like? It looks different on every single person. Unless you're creating the artifice, then it looks exactly the same on every single person, right? One example I could use is I'm on this newsletter for women in politics, like this group that gets more and more women involved in politics, which is amazing. But whenever their newsletters come to me and it's got like, 10 pictures of the women who've gone through the program, everybody has their arms crossed. Like every single photograph, everyone has their arms crossed. And I know that there's this, it's not right or wrong, but there is this automatic connection to, well, here's a camera pointing at me. And luckily, I know what to do with my hands, because the way I think that we're supposed to show that we're powerful is to cross our arms. And I have this conversation with people all the time. I mean, I've had more than 700 clients in the last 8 years, accounting for more than 1,000 photo sessions. So a lot of them work with me twice. And anytime someone new crosses their arms, I'm just like, is that something that you do? And she's like, actually, I've never crossed my arms before, but I feel like this is what I'm supposed to do. It's a protection thing. And that's why I'm bummed out about the way it shows up, especially for some reason, it's politicians and real estate developers crossing their arms. It's a protected stance. And I know that it's what we assume is supposed to be the way a power stance comes across, but it's really not. And when people see the photos, because I've pulled people, like, what do you see in this person? They're like, well, their arms are crossed, so they're trying to keep me out for some reason. So,
that's like the idea of like the fortress, I just come to mind, like, I spent some time in New Zealand, and they build these, I don't remember the name, so I'm sorry, but they're like mounds of dirt, fortresses that, they would live on, these different levels, and I just think about like, protector.
Yeah.
But that's showing the strength in like an old survival mechanism, right? So when you're confronted with the camera, it's like, ooh, fight or flight. Like, I don't know, there's maybe this trigger that automatically goes to, can't show my weakness.
Yeah. Well, there's a million different kinds of armor that I see in this. And
what else do you see?
well, one that might surprise most people is the smile. And I know that probably,
I'm guilty. I'm totally guilty of that.
Coming from a photographer, that probably sounds crazy. But because I love photographs of people smiling, don't get me wrong. But let me just tell you how a session often goes. So I'm at a retreat, they come in, they're literally shaking many times, on the verge of tears, especially if I'm at a retreat or conference, because they're usually confronting other things during whatever the program is. And so they're kind of raw, and then they stumble in to see me, right? And they've hired me, right? So they know, and they've taken the time to walk in there. So I automatically know that they want this at some level. Just like the first story I told you, even though she said, I have no intention of doing this, she was there. She was there, which is why I asked if we could go further. So, and then when I start taking photographs, everyone obviously has a smile. No matter how terrified or even grumpy or angry they are, the smile is out. And I will give my clients early on in the session permission not to smile. And just the way I do it, even though I'm giving away all my secrets here, the way I do it is I say, for the next 30 seconds, you don't have to smile. Like, let's just take a few photos where you're not smiling. Just be here. Just be here with me, and I'll just photograph you like this for a few minutes. I'll add 30 seconds on to the other end of the photo session, so I don't feel like you lost time. And what I found is 90% of the time, I'm not exaggerating. It's going to sound like this couldn't possibly be true, but it is. 90% of the time, in the first 10 seconds of them not smiling, they are in tears. And when that first happened, I was like, uh-oh, what's happening right now? But after I experienced it a lot of times, and after having conversations after the sessions, I found that it was permission not to smile. It was realizing that they didn't have to put this darn wall up in front of them anymore with this smile that says, it's okay. Whatever I'm going through doesn't matter, right? Everything's okay, which I know many women can relate to that, because I hear this conversation. I have this conversation all the time with my clients. So the smile is a piece of armor that you might not have guessed it would be. And when people get permission not to have that piece of armor up anymore, the tears come, the tears go, They gather back up, and then when they're smiling, it's because, oh, this is fun now, which is why I want my clients to be smiling, because, you know, they're having fun, or they're feeling this joy well up inside them just from embodying whatever it is, their power, their adventurous nature, their knowledge, their nurturing nature, their adventure nature, like whatever that piece is, it will often just bring up this real smile. And that's what I'm looking for. So.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing your trade secrets. Anything else you're willing to share about that? Because this is really interesting. Yeah. You know, we think that our armor is like the closed off nature, but I like how you say the smile. That's a really good point.
Yeah, the smile is one. I mean, you know, I worked with someone yesterday that she didn't care anything about any of the photography stuff that was going on until I raised my camera to take the first photograph. And then it was like, what kind of camera do you use? My cousin is a photographer and he uses Canon cameras. I see you're using Sony. Why do you use Sony? Is Sony a good camera? Like this happens often, where once it comes up, they're like, what else can I do to keep this from happening? Honestly, is like, and it's subconscious, right? It's subconscious. She's not purposely trying to keep the session from starting, but people know that I can't take a photograph while they're talking. And so sometimes they won't say much until I have the camera pointed at them. And then it's like, now I'm going to tell you or ask you a lot of questions, or, I mean, armor can be. So this is sort of interesting. So I had a client once that, and I've had either permission from people to share these stories, or they're like, you can tell people about what went on, just don't tell them who it was. So I have permission to tell you these stories. So different sorts of armor were showing up for this person. And I felt like every time I took one away, like permission not to smile, or, you know, us having, not having conversations while I'm actually taking the photographs, different pieces of armor would come up every time I removed some other piece of armor. And at the end, what happened was she hadn't been doing this the first half hour of session, but she started blinking uncontrollably. So this is like how deep within us this desire to hide can be, that there was a physical manifestation that I am 100% sure she wasn't aware of that was going on, that it was the blinking that hadn't been going on before was now suddenly going on when all the other possibilities of keeping me away were gone. So, but I have tips. Do you want me to give some tips? Because I can share some things with
please.
People
yes.
who are watching.
Yes.
These are things you can do no matter what photographer you're working with, because really you need to surrender. The first tip is kind of to surrender control of all the things that you can't control. And there's a lot of things you can't control in the photo session. Number one being when he or she pushes the button and takes the photograph. So letting go of all of those things. Now that sounds pretty hard too. So I always tell my clients, if they have time, to meditate right before they get there, or to show up early and sit in their car and meditate or something. Because the first thing I want them to do, and the first thing I would tell anyone who's going into a photo session to do, is to take time to ground. And it's deep breaths, and it's feeling your feet on the floor. My clients almost always say, can I take my shoes off? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And they all think they're the first person that's going to be in their socks, and they are never the first person in their socks, because everybody wants to. And really give yourself permission, even if you have to stop the session for a moment and ask the photographer, you know what, I need a moment, to give yourself that time and close your eyes. Feel your energy drop out of your head, down into your power center, or whatever words you might have for it, or stomp your feet a little bit and really feel your feet on the ground. Stomp your bare feet on the ground of the studio. Take that time. The second one is, and this would be something you would probably do beforehand, is to see if you can get in touch with what some of your, what I call facets are. Every woman, every person, especially women, are this incredible array of tangible and intangible facets. So it's spiritual, powerful, sensual, nurturing, adventurous, different words for every person. in different degrees for every person. So some people are a lot of this and a little of this, and other people are a little of this and a little of this and a lot of this other thing. So what are those things for you? What words would your 3 best friends use to describe you? Right? I like to ask people that question if we haven't had too much time together before the session. And what things do you wish your clients could see in you that you know exist within you? Could be your knowledge, could be your power, could be your confidence. And that's a hard one sometimes when you're looking into the lens of a camera. But just knowing what those things are before you go into a session. Is it okay if I mention the playbook that I have on my site? It's free for people.
Absolutely.
So at tribeofdiamonds.com/shine, SHINE, you can access a Diamond Facets playbook that I have there. It's free. And it helps people kind of sort out what some of those words might be. So knowing what some of those are before your session can be very helpful. So you're grounded. You know that you're powerful. You remember that you're powerful. You remember that you're knowledgeable or approachable is a big one too. Now you're looking into the lens of the camera. Now you've made this connection with the camera. The third tip that I would give you is to have a message. So you've got a connection now. And the third thing would be, now that you have this connection, what do you want to say to whoever's seeing the photograph? It's different depending on why you're using the photograph. A shortcut that I like to use if this is for someone's business is answering the question from your potential client, can you help me? Right? So this person's just landed on your website and they're looking at this gorgeous photograph on your homepage or video or something, and they're thinking, I wonder if this person can help me. So how would you non-verbally answer that question if you were just looking at them? And I've done this with clients for a really long time. Asking that question can be very powerful because when you're looking in the lens of the camera, just like I'm looking in the lens of a camera right now, I'm not looking at a camera. I'm not looking at this camera right now. I'm looking at Nicole, and I'm looking at anyone who's watching this, and I'm communicating with them. So when you're looking in the lens of the camera, you are looking at your potential client, your potential partner, if it's for a dating website, you know, your children when they grow up, whatever the use for these photographs is, you're making that connection. So answering that question, can you help me, is huge for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Those are great tips. Roxy, do you mind bringing up a comment I saw earlier from Rachel, something about the image? There are many who like to be seen at their best. An image lasts forever. Mm-hmm. Yes. So those are 3 key things from Don here. Grounding, being grounded and maybe in that meditative state. And knowing your facets or your virtues that you're showing up with, and your message. Yeah. What message are you promoting with this? And you mentioned videos too, because you do videos as well. Quite gorgeous work with, you know, you just have this harmonious blend of knowing how to use the camera and match it with the music. And I've always quite enjoy watching your stuff. So that's on your website as well. Can people check that out?
Yeah. My site's filled with a lot of the videos that I've created. That latest one, Prayer for Gaia, is on the homepage right now. So no, actually I moved it. It's down lower on the homepage now, but I'm really proud of that piece. Yeah. Yes. As far as, can I mention something about the comment that we just saw come through?
Yeah, please.
So when it says people wanting to see their best, I absolutely agree with that. And that's absolutely key. I think what I found is people really connecting to it being their best and not the best that someone else projected onto them. And I think in the age of social media, this is an even bigger thing, because I had a client recently who, at the beginning of a session, she's like, well, I was a little bit nervous, but my 15-year-old showed me how I should stand and what I should do with my face so that these will look good. And I was like, please forget everything she said. No offense, but because that's more of everyone showing up the exact same way, right? And one sure way to not stand out is to do exactly what everyone else is doing, because you feel like they're putting the version of what's best on you. And I think this is so much more important than it has ever been. I mean, with the rise, it's really a epidemic of suicide among very young girls now these days. And a big part of it is, if they can't show up the way that they're told that they should be able to show up, they won't be acceptable, right? And I really hope that my work has been skewing younger and younger, and I really hope that someday I can somehow work with girls that feel this pressure to show them, like, I know it's a bigger deal than working with me because there's a lot of societal pressures going on with this, but to really be able to touch and own what's the version of you that you know is best in spite of what anybody else thinks. And that's kind of where that question comes in. What would your three best friends use as the three words that they would use to describe you, right? And they'll say things, the best friends will say things that maybe they're not thinking about when they're being photographed, because they're thinking, well, this is how I'm supposed to present myself because my daughter who's on social media told me how to do it. It's like, I really want to destroy that that thought, like the way social media molds everyone is really damaging, I think.
Mm-hmm. This is I like, this point that you brought up, because I read a statistic that just totally shocked me. This was a few years ago. So it was in Canada that 50% of adolescents under 18 that are diagnosed with anxiety or depression commit suicide. 50%.
Wow.
And I thought, how is that even possible? And then, but recently, there's been talk, or just awareness around how affected kids are, and hospitalizations for attempted suicides have gone up. So I'm thinking, wow, if it's already at 50, how, this is crazy. And like you say, it really stems into that not being good enough. These are where all those beliefs are formed, maybe even earlier, but really they come front and center when we're a teenager, when we're developing and we're exploring, and it's such a delicate time, and so when we're working with someone in adulthood that is still carrying around these wounds,
mm-hmm.
There's a lot that goes on there, and I think that the work is so important to. So,
well, and for the last 20 years, or especially the last 10 years, and more every year, our perceived self-value is measured by someone else's algorithm, like literally, right? So right. It's like we're looking for the likes and looking for the comments, and oh my gosh, I watch it drive people around me crazy. And I watch people reacting by wanting to change something about how they're showing up in the world for the like specifically. And it's just the saddest thing. I understand it, but I think we're underestimating how hugely damaging this actually is.
It's just what we're conditioned for, we're not trained to really ground and see our virtues and work with, our shadow bits. You have a great quote that I've seen recently too. I didn't write it down or remember, but something about magic in the shadow. Do you have that?
Yeah, it's a very complicated quote actually, but I can try to give it to you. And it's one thing to pretend we are something that we are not, but it's quite another thing to pretend we're not something that we are, and your magic is in your shadow. And what I really mean by that is, a lot of people are pretending they're something that they're not, and we're all aware of that, and it happens quite a bit on social media. But there's also people, and we all do it, I do it, who are pretending not to be something that we are. And that's really the shadow part. It's not just that you're, putting on a facade, it's that you have this other thing that is buried, and it's our shadow. And I think when we know what that thing is and find the gift in it, right, and embrace it, it opens up everything in the world. I mean, I cannot describe to you how much standing on a stage or even doing a video radio show 10 years ago was something that I would have told you lost your mind if you said I would be doing this. And until I was willing to confront that, my life was not what I wanted it to be, and from
I'm curious. I was thinking about this with your example of not, being on the stage, but here you are, and it's really snowballed into your work the last 8 years or so that you said.
Yeah.
What was it that you had to confront?
It's that, so there's the not being seen part. There's the wounded healer part, because a lot of that was around trauma, like childhood trauma stuff. I think we kind of started at the wounded healer and really never went full into it. But there's a lot of deep, in everyone, there's this deep wounding that has come from people that we were supposed to trust, and often comes in our childhood. I know from working with my clients and from them telling me things like that I don't prompt them to tell me, that the kind of childhood abuse that I suffered is actually suffered by, among my clients, 80%. 80% that actually out loud with their mouths tell me about what they've experienced. So until I could really confront and own that and go and step into the light anyway, and bring that with me as a gift too, right? Because I wouldn't be able to quickly create these connections with clients that I know hurt. They're in pain, because when they come in, they're shaking and crying about being seen. And if I hadn't experienced everything I have experienced, this is the wounded healer part, right? I wouldn't be able to walk into that dark, scary places with them and say, let's go into this dark, scary place, find this thing that you feel like was taken from you, no matter what it is, walk back out into the light with that thing intact, knowing that it's a part of you, because you can see it now in this photograph, right? You don't just feel it. There's also proof. And say, this is mine again. Like, my body is mine. My power is mine. My sovereignty is mine. Whatever that thing is for that person.
Mm-hmm. So this is your message that you're really sharing, and I think it's so poignant right now because of, let's see, it's a great quote. I never looked at it that way before, but so enlightening, Dawn. Says Heather. Thank you. You made some really great points, and I'm saying, it's that poignant message right now as we emerge. Whether you're emerging into summer from this, spring, or even just emerging from this lockdown measures and the pandemic energy that we've been surrounded in, really being able to emerge with those bits, going into the shadows and coming back out with what you've lost or what you feel was taken from you. I love that. Mm-hmm. Any other last words before we wrap up here around that? I guess I'm also curious to know what Heather, maybe Heather, what was the quote that you, Dawn's quote, magic is the shadow. I'm sorry. Okay. Go.
I would say, I think one of the things I did want to mention, we may have covered it a little bit, but healers specifically, I work with a lot of healers. Yesterday was a Reiki healer. She's had a recent diagnosis of multiple sclerosis, so she's going through her own stuff. In the course of the last year, she had this diagnosis a year ago. And so there's, physical healing and things that are present in the session too sometimes. But many healers that I work with, when they are afraid, when they verbalize to me or express to me physically that they're afraid, right, in the session, what I find is that the wound that's keeping them from wanting to be seen or causing the imposter syndrome or whatever it is, it's really that wounded healer aspect of them that they may not be owning or seeing or something. And so, as you can imagine, I have a lot of conversations during the sessions and before, if we have time for it. So if there are healers who kind of have this piece of themselves that is compartmentalized somewhere, and it's like, well, that thing didn't happen to me or something. There's this amplification, I think, of the healing process that is actually brought in as a gift from that wound, and actually owning it, especially during a session, and often because of the photo session, is incredibly important. So, and that can really, I mean, the wounded healer piece really lands for my clients after these sessions, because they've seen it come in, and they know that they're looking at the camera in a different way when they're like, guess what? This is all of me. Here I am. And I got a lot of power to bring to you with my healing. So just a message for other healers on the call right now.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. I think that's great important aspects to look at, and food for thought when we're showing up and working with what's coming up around that. I would love to continue this conversation, but we have to go. Our time is up for today. So Don, will you come back and join us another time?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you.
That would be great. Yes. Good. So I guess we'll wrap up here for our Fun Friday, Language of Healing. Thank you, Don Hajicek. That was really wonderful. And people can go find you at tribeofdiamonds.com.
Yep.
Good. Very good. We will see you soon. And for our listeners today, what will you take with you from this conversation that will support you for the rest of your life? See you.
Wow, what a show today, and the journey does not stop here. Come travel the world with Nicole every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, as together we become more fluent in the language of healing on W4CY Radio and Talk 4 TV. See you next week.